Welcome to the Monkey Off My Backlog podcast, the podcast where we exercise our pop culture demons by tackling our media to-do lists 1 week at a time. I'm your host, Andy Bowman, and with me are my co-hosts, Dr. Sam Morris.
Hello.
And Tessa Suela.
Hello.
Let's get it on. So this is our first episode. I hope you listening would know that because this is episode number 1. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the ideas of this podcast, what we're doing, why I feel the need to start a second podcast, and who we are. So first, let's just cover who we are. I'm Andy Bowman. I am a grad student and co-host of the Geek 101 podcast. Go ahead, Dr. Sam.
I'm Sam Morris. I am a assistant professor of English education. I do a lot with young adult literature, and lately been writing some about music.
And I'm Tessa Suela. I am also a grad student along with Andy. One of us has moved beyond the grad student realm at this point. And I am currently writing about speculative fiction.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea. Pretty much, I think this idea comes from like chasing that dragon of wanting to experience something new and good, and I personally am always on the lookout for something that I haven't experienced before, particularly content, because I'm actually kind of a fraidy cat. Like, you know, when people say I want to experience something new, I always seem to think like, oh, you want to go skydiving or something, and I never want to skydive. So one of these things is, though, I've got lists. I mean, I've got lists of video games that I've never heard of, movies that random people on Reddit recommend with, you know, budgets in the double digits, and all these kinds of pieces of media to consume. I mean, my Netflix queue is so long because as soon as something interests me, I just add it to the list and then never touch it again. And I don't think I've removed anything from my Netflix queue list in like 2 years. I have a problem, and all of this collectively, the TV shows that I watched a season of and then didn't keep up with when the second season aired, the many books I have on my bookshelf because I go to a used bookstore and just buy tons of books, the many movies that I've added to lists, I want to start getting into that. I want to start actually forcing myself to say, hey, go ahead and watch this movie instead of watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the 13th time. Like, you need to do something new. You know, I have this same obsession that every human has with novelty, but I also love to go through the same things because I know I like it and it's comforting. And I was just narcissistic enough to come up with a podcast about it. And once I came up with the name, I just had to create it.
And we're very glad that you did.
It's a great name.
It's a great idea for a podcast, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I was so relieved when I looked it up and nobody had taken this name.
Well, here we are. We have taken it.
Yes. All right, guys. Let's just talk a little bit about, you know, the idea of what a backlog is. What is your guys' relationship with backlogs? Sam, why don't you go first?
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Ha.
Well, starting the first episode out with misogyny is a great idea.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Tessa, you want to go ahead?
Just dance around. This whole podcast is just going to be us going, no, you go first.
We're going to be the politest podcast south of the Canadian border.
What? So I think that people have backlogs for a lot of different reasons. I honestly kind of, when you told me about this podcast, Andy, I had this very visceral reaction of, yeah, there's so much stuff on my list. And then I realized that, for me anyway, my list is a lie, because I keep telling people that I have, oh, I'll put it on my list, but there's no actual list. Or there didn't used to be. I actually did create a list for this podcast. But it's one of those things where I think that for me, a lot of it's because there are so many options now. I mean, media has really just exploded over the last 10 years with streaming and with sort of this golden age of television. Are we still in the golden age of television? I don't know. This new resurgence of really great television, especially, has made it very, very hard to keep up with everything. Music has exploded. And so it's just, there's a lot of media out there, and a lot of people are very invested in certain media. And so I just feel like it adds up. Like, you just eventually sort of get to the point where you're like you said, Andy, there's just so much out there. I'd rather just watch Grey's Anatomy again. I know what's going to happen. It doesn't scare me. And so you just sort of end up stuck in sort of a circle, and then every once in a while you add something new to the list. So I think part of the reason why there are backlogs is just the sheer number of things that exist now.
Now, Tessa, did you know we are now in uncertain times?
And just now.
Yes.
We have entered the uncertain times.
For people tuning in the year 2030, this is in the middle of the great COVID pandemic that ravaged our economy and did so much more damage. But this is also before the aliens landed and took over.
Yeah, it was before the enslavement.
And I, for one, would like to welcome our ant leaders and happily volunteer to work in their underground salt mines.
All right, Sam, what about you? What is your relationship with your own personal backlog?
I am a compulsive list maker. I before Letterboxd, I what year is it now? So about 18 years ago, I created an Excel spreadsheet to keep track of the movies I watched. It doesn't exist anymore. No, it probably still exists somewhere. I have a Goodreads account that is out of control.
He has playlists on Spotify that are itemized by year.
Yeah. So my relationships to lists is strong. If you were alive and on the internet in around 2008, I guess, one of the peak think pieces out there was about Netflix and Hotel Rwanda, and it was all about, because this was back when Netflix was by mail only. People would order Hotel Rwanda because, it's the right thing to watch. Right? It's a good movie. It's got Don Cheadle. Who doesn't like Don Cheadle? It's about something very serious, very real, and very important. And then it would sit on top of the TV or the DVD player or the coffee table for months and months and months, and Netflix would just take your money. I would also add City of God to that list, neither of which I have seen. Probably will happen during the course of this podcast. But ever since then, it's just been a matter of, watching things, watching shows, reading books out of obligation, or not, thinking that you're obligated and not doing it. And that's where I come at this podcast. Like, I get to do all the things now, and it's fun, and it's for a good reason. So I'm looking forward to it for that reason.
Well, Sam, I'm glad that you're a man after my own heart with your compulsive list making. It was... So my letterbox right now, I'm looking at it, and there are 1,051 films that I want to see. These range from movies that I don't remember adding. Like, there's something called the Niall Hilton incident. I'm sure I had a reason to add it at some point, but it's added. And yeah, the Netflix things hits home because I have a DVD copy of Black Dynamite because I kept it for so long that Netflix just charged me for the DVD.
Wow, that's next level.
I love that you guys are like compulsive list makers. My Letterboxd is literally half a week old. Like, I just made it for this podcast.
And it took months to convince her to make one.
So we'll definitely talk more about our Letterboxd accounts because that's going to be a great way to keep up with us and our opinions on things beyond, Twitter. But let's, kind of continue the discussion. Let's, do you guys have like any tips or ideas about how to even start clearing this insurmountable amount of content that's going to take us the rest of our lives feasibly to get in? And that's not even counting the idea that there are still an inflow of new content that you're going to be adding to your list too.
Well, I think it's really important to remember that you'll just never watch, play, listen to it all. It's just not possible. Two things that I have done historically. When I first joined Goodreads, I found a community that was doing a seasonal reading challenge. In fact, it's called Seasonal Reading Challenge. And it was basically where you would score points for reading certain kinds of books that meet certain kinds of challenges. I found that group rather rigid in its rules, so I created my own spin-off called Reading with Style. Also still exists on Goodreads. I am technically a moderator of it, but I have had nothing to do with it for years. But it's just a way of gaming working through your list, and that worked for a while. Another approach that I have come to is kind of the more goal-oriented thing. I just remember I really enjoy watching the Academy Awards. I have done for years, and I eventually got to the point where I said, I'm going to watch every Best Picture nominee. This was before they expanded to 10, which made it slightly more difficult. But I've done it every year, and it's a good feeling of satisfaction. So I think different approaches to goal making definitely help make a dent.
Well, step one, make a list. If you are not a rigid list maker, it actually does help. Like I definitely have a problem where out of sight, out of mind. And so I forget about certain media for years and years and years until I'm like, oh yeah, that was something you've always planned on watching. Or consuming, I guess. Consuming is such a strange word to use on this podcast. So I would definitely say make a list if you're not a list maker, if you don't already have one. The other thing too is what Sam said, give yourself manageable goals. Like, don't start with infinite jest if that is on your list. Start with something that's a little easier to consume, like a shorter book, or just if you're sitting there going, I can't watch this television show, there's 10 seasons of it, and where would I even start? Just watch a season of it, right? Like there's no rules saying that you have to binge the whole thing all at once. You can just say, I'm going to watch a season of this, and then I'm going to take a break and watch Grey's Anatomy or How I Met Your Mother or whatever it is that your show is that is your comfort show. You can also break it up in terms of weekly watching. You can do a weekly movie night where you take something off of the list, or you can do a weekly night where you watch. Right now, we're actually watching through the X-Files that way. We're watching 2 X-Files every Thursday night generally. So these are ways that you can sort of manage these goals and sort of break them down into manageable sizes. So you're not, doing the thing where you read the first chapter of a very difficult book and then go, oh, well, I tried. I think that's part of the problem is sort of starting too big and then not wanting to do it.
One of my personal productivity, this is a pop culture productivity podcast, which it's a great alliterative subtitle. One of my personal things that I do, and this annoys the heck out of my wife, when we're trying to watch a movie, we're trying to figure out what to watch, we're going down the list, I will now, if we can't decide within a certain amount of time, I will just play the first thing alphabetically on the list. Which is great when you are able to have everything sorted out by your list. And I'm glad to report that after like 2 years, I have finally made it through 5 centimeters at a time, the Japanese animated film.
Nice. We actually started 5 or 6 weeks ago. We took 5 slips of paper apiece and wrote down 5 movies that have come out in the last 5 years and put them in a beer stein. And that is what we do every Monday.
We draw a movie.
Yep.
And we watch that movie.
And we like it.
That's a great idea. Maybe we can make like a randomizer, right? And have randomizer episodes where we...
I think it'd be cool.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just where we have a randomizer, we click it, and it's just like Andy does this, Tessa does this, Sam does this.
Okay.
I
And
also-
so we're obviously also going to do the Infinite Jest theme week,
The
correct?
Infinite Jest theme.
Yes.
I will listen to a podcast about Infinite Jest called Just Friends.
I also think that it would be cool, maybe in a future episode, to have like a fan letterbox request, like fans could come on and our audience could look at our letterboxes and say, Tessa should watch this movie, Sam should watch this movie.
Okay.
Like a theme.
Well, now I think we should call our fans monkeys, our listeners. I think we should call them monkeys, right?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Monkeys.
That just that's the kind of genius that you're listening to this for. I will go ahead and let people know who have somehow suffered through the first however long we've been recording. I don't think that these episodes will be this long normally. And we are all about positivity and actually getting through your backlog. So we do want to hear from you guys. Like, if we can convince you to finally watch Akira Kurosawa's High and Low, which is my pick for this, or whatever's been that monkey on your backlog, whatever's been your Infinite Jest, because I'm guessing Tessa hasn't read Infinite Jest since she's bringing it up so much.
Infinite Jest and I have a relationship. It's not a healthy or functional one, but it's a relationship.
Right. So we listeners, like, this is the first episode, but letting you know right now, keep us updated on what you're doing. Give us things to add to our lists, because or at least I am a massive masochist, and I want that. I want to know more things, and here's the best part. I don't know if you guys have ever had something hyped up to you, and then you realize after experiencing it, it wasn't worth experiencing.
Never. That has never happened to me. Everything has always met expectation.
Right. Hopefully this show can actually help some people out with that. When, I watch a movie, I'm like, oh, well, it was fine. Green Book hasn't stood the test of time in these past few years.
I feel like Green Book was already outdated when it came out, but that's a different podcast.
Yeah. So, and beyond that, I do want to go ahead and just verify that this is a judgment-free zone from me, probably from Tessa and Dr. Sam.
Yes.
I have some big gaps in my repertoire of things I should watch, right? There's going to be moments where something will pop up on the podcast feed in the title, and a fan somewhere out there, we're going to call you Peter, will scream, "What? How have you not seen Terminator?" I'm sorry, I haven't, okay? Don't judge me. I won't judge you. This is all about positivity and finally tackling those things up. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't make you a bad person if you haven't seen Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Which listeners of the Geek 101 podcast will know that for the longest time, the only Indiana Jones movie I had seen was Crystal Skull.
But why?
Ew.
Hey, and you know what?
But why?
Crystal Skull was not bad.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, a little judgment.
Judgment free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Judgment free.
Just about his opinion, not that he hadn't seen the other
Right.
ones.
So you see, because I hadn't seen the other ones, I actually didn't have any expectations about Crystal Skull, and it was fine.
Oh, okay, that makes
sure.
sense.
Yeah,
I could
sure.
see how that would work, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, you'll hear the deets at, short for details, at the end of the podcast on how to get in contact with us and let us know. But please, we want this to be a beacon of hope in these dark, uncertain times. All right, guys, we have come up with 2 rules maybe for this podcast that I can think of. One being that the content we are covering, we will try our hardest to be spoiler free. We're only going to be discussing the first third of whatever we listen to, unless there's something that absolutely has to be talked about, and that will clearly be telegraphed much earlier we don't want to spoil anyone. We don't want to take away anyone's fun of finding out that Darth Vader is Lord Voldemort, right?
Right. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
that's a really important twist. We would not want anyone to know that.
And my personal thing, and you will realize that I am already thinking of ways to undermine this, but this piece of media should have been on your list for at least a year.
Yes, I think, I mean, I want to be as flexible about it as possible because we've talked a lot about how we want to tackle different kinds of media. So, some weeks, we're going to be looking at movies, and some weeks, some of us will be looking at books or music or video games or, different things, different types of media. And so we want to make sure that it is actually a monkey off the backlog, not, just, oh, I've been wanting to watch this for 3 weeks. But I mean, I think at the same time, there's going to be some flexibility in these rules because, for an example, if one of us does a piece of music, I mean, I hate to tell you guys, music's really hard to spoil. I can't talk about the first third of a song. But I think like just sort of abiding by the spirit of the rules and saying, yeah, like this is something that's been out for over a year, at least a year, but it's not been on my list that long. It's not something I just heard about. I think
Tessa, you've got to when you're doing a song, you'll say something like, okay, so the song is all about how this person will do anything for love. Anything at all. And you can't spoil the rest of that line.
No.
Right?
No.
And you can't tell somebody when the beat drops.
Yeah, I can't tell them.
If it doesn't happen in the first minute, like,
yeah,
I'm not going to tell you.
it.
I can't even tell you if the beat drops.
Oh, guys. Yeah, but I think generally those are two good guiding principles. So spoiler free, unless otherwise indicated, and has been on the list for at least a year.
Right, and within a few weeks, there will be such a sneaky monkey-like way that I'm going to undermine that second one.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right.
I look forward to the challenge.
Dr. Sam, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Sam_Morris9, and you can find me on Letterboxd as Archie Leach 9.
Tessa, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Swehla, SWEHLA, Tessa, and you can also find me on Letterboxd under the same name.
All right. You can find me on Twitter at Hebrews Pale Ale and Letterboxd as well. You can find us on Twitter at Monkey Backlog. You can email us at monkeyoffmybacklog@gmail.com. Our theme song, Hot Shot by Scott Holmes, can be found at scottholmesmusic.com. Please rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. That's all we have today. Get that monkey off your back.